Okay, everything's reconnected now. The live stream, we will be going live in very shortly. A moment. Okay, going live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this first panel discussion as part of the Outdoor Dance Showcase 2022. My name is Irene Segura, and I lead on international relations and talent development for Xtrax, a development organization for outdoor arts and one of the key partners behind the Outdoor Dance Showcase program. I am a white woman in my 30s, I have long dark hair, and today I'm wearing a light blue top and some golden earrings. I am very pleased to say that you are more than 100 people to have registered and be joining us online today. Before introducing the chair for today's panel discussion, I would like to run through a few practicalities to ensure you make the most of this experience. Please feel free to use the public chat on the right-hand side to say hello, who you are and where you are from. For access purposes, all of today's sessions will be live captioned and BSL interpreted. We strongly encourage you to ask the panelists questions. So to do so, please use the questions tab in the chat and we will pass them on to the chair. We're recording this discussion, which will be available to view on the event platform shortly after the end of the session and until Monday, the 4th of July. Feel free to comment, post and tweet about this event using the hashtag Outdoor Dance Showcase 22 and make sure to follow Xtrax, BIDF and Fabric on social media, as we will be sharing follow-up resources. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our chair for this session, Subha Subramanian, Artistic Director and Joint CEO of Academy. Subha is a choreographer and educator working at the confluence of dance, culture and science, having spent over 20 years as Artistic Director of 2 South Asian dance companies, Angika and Sadhana Dance. Creating work for theatres, festivals, and alternative spaces, Subha's works are a result of in-depth cross-art collaborations with award-winning artists alongside extended periods of research undertaken with scientists and academic institutions. Thank you, Subha, and over to you.
Thank you, Irene. Welcome, everybody. As they said, my name is Subha. I am a South Indian woman in her 40s. I have dark brown hair, shoulder-length hair, and I'm wearing a pink sleeveless top. I hope you're all well and looking forward to what we hope will be a really interesting discussion around alternative models of dance creation for public spaces. I hope the sun is shining where you are. It is a glorious day here. Thanks for taking the time to join us live. And if you're watching later, welcome. We have 3 really wonderful, knowledgeable panelists who know lots about making work and alternative models for dance creation in public spaces through their own practice and knowledge, and we will be hearing from them shortly. The plan is to introduce each of them in turn. They will each speak for about 10 minutes, and whilst you're listening, I encourage you to put your questions in the chat. And at the end of all 3 discussions, we will try and answer as many questions as possible during our discussion. So without further ado, instead of me talking, I'm going to introduce our very first speaker, Charlotte Spencer. Charlotte is a choreographer, teacher, curator, mentor, performer, and a London Contemporary Dance School graduate. She initiates all her projects for Charlotte Spencer Projects, and often works across art forms and in outdoor environmental contexts. Charlotte was a recipient of a Bonnie Bird Choreographic Development Award in 2020. Her work has been presented nationally and internationally with a wide variety of partners in lots of different kinds of spaces, and these include places like the Brighton Festival, Dance Umbrella, Sadler's Wells, The Place, Welcome Collection, Southeast Dance, Tramway Dance International Glasgow, Siobhan Davis Dance, Turner Contemporary, Festival DDD in Portugal, and Festival Plage de Danse in France. Charlotte, over to you.
Hi, and it's really lovely to be here kind of virtually with you all today. As Zuba said, I'm Charlotte Spencer. I'm a fair-skinned woman in my late 30s. I have long red and silver hair tied in a messy bun today, and I'm wearing a black top and a blue cardigan. Thank you so much for the introduction. Yes, I work as a choreographer and a dance artist. And for the past decade, my focus has been mostly on making work outdoors, although I've actually just returned to making a show for the theatre, so I guess it keeps on changing. I have made one-off performances for specific sites and outdoor performances that have toured. I've made work with professional and non-professional performers, and I think the starting place for my interest in making work outdoors was finding myself really keen to present work in the midst of life itself, not kind of separated off in the bubble of a theatre, but in parks, on beaches, in public spaces, in places where the space between performance and stage and life became quite blurry. I try to create live performance encounters that enter our bodies in ways that can shift our perspective of our experience of ourselves, our bodies, of our relationship with others, with place, and with our environment. And to do that, I started trying to make performances where audiences could encounter the work with their own bodies, where they could be both the performers and the audience at the same time. I must say I'm not a usual candidate for participatory performance. I'm quite shy and a bit hesitant in social situations, and indeed I may well not sign up for the kind of performances that I have been making. So there's a kind of irony there, I guess, and a slight conundrum. But I do think that probably that rather hesitant perspective has been quite useful in the creative process, and it has always been at the forefront of my considerations in the making of these works. How do we invite audiences in? How do we make an invitation that is welcoming, not exposing or humiliating for people who are unsure? With each project, I try to engage with the questions of the work, the inquiries of the work in all aspects of how the project is realised. And I will talk about a couple of those in a second. So this is not just the content of any one performance. It includes how we structure the creation, how we work with performers, how we build connections with audiences, partners and funders. And in the context of making outdoor performances, this has often led to making processes that are deeply embedded in the landscape, where there is a focus on working with the site rather than simply on it. Generally, this approach has required spending long durations in and with the place or places, taking time alone and with others to notice what is already there, to listen, to smell, to play, to open all of our senses to feel what a place is offering before we start making our own marks or imprints on it. The two most notable projects that I've worked on outdoors have been choreographic performances through headphones, Walking Stories and Is This a Wasteland? And I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those in just a second. With both of them, rather than sitting and watching, audiences create the performance themselves. They clamber around it, listening and responding, moving, figuring out how to be together and how to work together or not. Maybe the person who's helping with the technology could just start running the slideshow now. And this is just a collection of images that are from both of these works, Walking Stories and Is This a Wasteland? They're in no sort of particular order. They just give a kind of flavour, I guess, of the kinds of environments and the kind of nature of the performances, which hopefully is helpful as I continue talking us through. Hang on a second. So yeah, hopefully you can see. I'm not sure if this is something that sorry, I don't know if it's something that I'm meant to be making the slideshow for, or if Winnie's doing it.
Winnie's going to put the slides up in a second, yeah. Winnie, if you could start sharing those images, please. We can only see your desktop, the folder.
Okay, amazing, thank you. Sorry, I just was suddenly like not sure if I was meant to be doing that. So Walking Stories is a piece that is made for parks in cities. It's a performance through headphones. I made it in 2013 for groups of up to 20 people to do together at any one time. And the audiences, they hear music and soundscapes and instructions which tell them what to do and where to go. Gradually, they realise that they're not all hearing the same thing. So we start to build a series of interactions and between different groups within the piece. There's much I could say about it, but I'm going to try and keep it brief. The sort of very general basic premise of the work was to try and take choreographic performance outside of theatre settings and to invite audiences to spend an hour in a green space, navigating a landscape on their own and together. It's an invitation to slow down, to see your surroundings with fresh eyes and share in a collective experience. That work was made through this sort of wider expanded process of us, the collaborative team, also travelling, navigating a landscape over a sort of expanded period of time. So I felt that if I was going to ask my audience to take a journey, albeit a short one, through a landscape of a park space, that we, the makers of it, we also needed to be on a journey through a landscape so that we could figure out what it was to be doing that as a group of people. So we travelled by bicycle between different residencies on the south coast of England and across France. We cycled 3,000 kilometres together. We lived together, we worked together, we camped. And as we worked and travelled, we made walking stories. So all of the field recordings from the piece are taken from being on the road. And even though that sort of theoretically we could have sat in a studio and just made this piece on a computer, I do believe that the creation of the work and what got realised was different because we were in this journey ourselves. And then between 2014 and 2017, I made This a Wasteland. It's also a performance through headphones, this time created for these sort of large, vast, disused sites in cities. We first presented it in 2017 with Dance Umbrella, Dance International Glasgow with Tramway and with an organisation in Corby in the Midlands, and then it was restaged in 2021 with Dance North in Scotland and Sadler's Wells. So we sort of over time worked on 5 different sites. This piece was made for up to 100 audience members and 6 performers. Again, the audience respond to instructions and invitations amidst a detailed sound score. Gradually, they realise, once again, they're not all hearing the same thing. Indeed, there are 5 separate strands of audio material that are running simultaneously. During the work that lasts an hour and 20 minutes, everyone is involved in working with objects to build things with their hands and their bodies, to pull them down, to make new things. The landscape keeps on changing, morphing, becoming something else. Sometimes people are working together in groups, sometimes alone, sometimes in direct conflict with each other. The encounter is physical and tactile and somewhat confusing. It takes place at dusk. It starts in daylight and finishes around a fire, drinking hot chocolate, eating biscuits, chatting as the light disappears. It's a piece that tries to grapple with the complexity of our relationships, of how we value our land, homes, and material things, how we respond to autonomy, co-responsibility, and authority. It began with this big question: how can we live with positivity and hope in times of crisis? And I think that the performance we made doesn't really provide easy answers, maybe not any answers at all, but it does try to engage with how we can be together, even in challenging times. I think I was really interested in working in these empty spaces to acknowledge what already thrives there, to participate in conversations about how we might imagine and animate our future spaces, to provide a space that made possible a wilder, more feral, more tactile version of ourselves than is normally permitted in public spaces. And by presenting the work on the very sites of change, it brings the themes of the project to the places where they are living. And this project was more a feeling of, I guess, indirect kind of response to the experience of making Walking Stories, which travelled a lot in the making of it and subsequently has also travelled a lot in the presenting of it. Is This a Wasteland was more a project about staying in single places for long durations of time to try and create a sense of, albeit temporary, occupancy and ownership of a place that normally we don't have access to, because these are not public places, they're private places that are normally sort of surrounded in hoardings. And so it was a very different way of engaging audiences and of creating work and of working as a collaborative team on it. I'll just finish by saying both of these performances are created by all those who arrive to experience it. Once the piece is running, we, the creative team, have very little control in how people interpret or respond to the instructions that we've devised. It really is a different work each and every time. And it's a different thing from sitting and watching, or sitting and having a conversation here. Our questions are brought to life through the body, through all of the bodies of the audiences as physical experience in direct relationship with the landscape that we travel in. And I think that has been really at the forefront of my interest these past years. And it continues to be so, even now that I've sort of just made a new work for the theatre. This question about how do we create performance where you as an audience member feel like your body is in the midst of it and your body is changed by it, is still very much in the middle of my creative inquiry. I think I will leave it there for now, because there's plenty more to say, but there's plenty of other people. So thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. That was really beautiful. I love the way you said, talked about how audiences could encounter the work with their own bodies. It's just such a visceral image to sort of leave us with as well, in all of the images. Thank you. I have a zillion questions, but I'm going to keep them all and not hog the space for later. So I'd like to now introduce, thank you so much, Charlotte. That was great. I'd love to introduce you now to Anna Schellblad. Anna is a director, a choreographer, dancer and artist who makes work for the stage, for galleries and for public spaces. Anna is based in Stockholm and works all over Sweden and internationally in productions and also in touring work. She's a director and consultant for cross-sector international art projects and educational programs, and is also a guest lecturer at art academies. Anna has performed and exhibited at international festivals in Stockholm at Moderna Museet, Dramaturn, MDT, Ericsson Globe, and many more. She has received support grants from the Swedish Arts Council, the Swedish Arts Grants Committee, Region Stockholm, and City of Stockholm, amongst many other funders. Anna, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Hello, everyone. I'm a woman in my 50s. I have brown curly hair. I'm white-skinned. Yes. So thank you for inviting me to this meeting. I also want to say that I work with a visual artist and sculptor, Helena Byström, who couldn't be here today. So, but I will get back to that. So I would like to start to talk about my why to work in an open space, or how I think about the place. For me, it's something to do with what I want to express, that place or a group of people, that professionals or amateurs or participators somehow, I believe or have a hunch that this could really develop the idea, or together with this place or these people could really get deeper into the idea or the question or the expression or the story that we somehow want to examine or explore. the place is chosen for a reason, both for its historical or conceptual and physical and visual reasons. So that we want to explore how can all of those mix with the movement and all the stories and the interpretations and feelings and explorations that the people who take part also bring or find or develop in this place. And something that is a curiosity of me and also Helena is the difference between being in a theater or a gallery. We make work for also for the stage and the gallery, but now focus on the public space, and lately that's been where we mostly make the work. It is something about a directness and a closeness and an intimacy that we feel that you can have with an audience that is different than in a theater. So this is something that I find is really interesting, and also a possibility to reach people who maybe not go to the theater. So that's some of the reasons. And then my background is also as a contemporary dancer, and so how I think about the body, I really try to explore the movement in a way that you can use all your skills as a mover, what you have from your history through life, may it be dance training, may it be some other kind of physical activity, labor, or some interest you have, and that you have gained some skills and knowledge and expression from moving. And how can we work from that to have a really in detail sensitive expression from the physical, together with all the other things that are with that place or that situation or concept, and the metaphors that place or the movements can inspire to or be interpreted as. I also work with many times performances are announced, so there will be an audience that know that this is happening and come for because they saw that this is happening, but also audiences that didn't know this was going to happen. So I also think about how would the work be for them? How can that audience who didn't know this was going to take place, how can it be perceived for them, or how can what are the things that I want to look at when creating for a spontaneous audience. And some of the themes I work with is it's the feminist. It's, you could call it a feminist work, and but it's also existential, and somehow those seems to go together. I feel. One work that we are touring now is called City Horses, and we have been touring. We just were in Prague. We're going to Berlin, and we're touring around Europe this summer. It's a group of women moving like a flock of wild horses through the city. And the background for this was, I do this with Helena Byström, was that we were walking around in our cities and saw statues of kings on horses, and this public historical art as a dominance of the public art. And still, we were looking for the representation of women and female bodies in this public space. And the ones we saw were mostly naked and laying down and kind of more passive bodied language. And we thought something was missing. And we wanted to add another story and another experience to the public space. So this performance, City Horses, is a challenging that male dominance in the public space. And please look at our website, cityhorses.se, for films and photos and more information about that. But that's an example of how movement, how we use the movement and the choreography together with the what's there already, and use the historical layers, the conceptual layers that are there, where we put the choreography, or where we mix in the movement and the choreography in a space. We also like to make projects that take a long time. We recently made a film that was commissioned from a small rural town with young women about what it was like living there. And there was a famous Swedish painter, Fanny Brate, who painted a painting in a room in that town 100 years ago. She painted her daughters. And being a female painter, she's not very well known, even though she's represented at the National Museum in Stockholm. So we made a film with two young women from this small town in the very same room that she painted her daughters. This we worked over a year, meeting regularly and meeting people in this place, and then filming in this room. And we actually have a premiere of this the 1st and 2nd of July in this small town. And you can find information of that on our website, also on our company website. So this is a little bit about how I work and how we work. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks so much, Anna. That was really beautiful. You've given us lots of really lovely images to think about. And also I love the way you talked about you bringing and adding other stories and experiences into a public space, and how you layer that with all the history and the context of the space in which the work is being made. Again, I have lots of questions about all that, but thank you so much. That was really, really beautiful. And our final speaker is Karen Wood. Karen is a Birmingham-born dancer, researcher, educator, maker, and producer. She works as assistant professor at the Centre for Dance Research at Coventry University and as associate director for Birmingham Dance Network. Her practice and research focuses on dance as a cultural practice and what it offers society today. Her latest research investigates the working conditions of freelance dance artists. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Suba. Hello, everybody. Lovely to be here today. My visual description is I'm a white middle-aged woman with curly blonde hair, black rimmed glasses, wearing a blue dress today with matching blue earrings, and I have a white background. So I am going to speak to you today about the Vibes project. So myself and a team of my colleagues at the Centre for Dance Research at Coventry University who are Jonathan Burrows, Rosie Lee and Scott Della Hunter, have been involved with the Vibes project, which is a and over actually, I mustn't forget Over. He's the sound composer that worked with us as well as on this part of the project. The Vibes project is funded by Creative Europe. It's a collaboration project, and Orb, who are a company based in Paris. Unfortunately, Xavier from Orb was going to be with us today, but he's in transit on his way to present Vibes at another festival in Prague. So Orb are a digital creation organisation, and the other partners within the project are Bassano del Grappa in Italy, ICK in the Netherlands, and Hellonic, who are in Finland. And this project started in 2020 and it finishes later this year. Vibe started as a mobile application. It started at the Danceathon in 2018. Orb created a digital platform and wanted to create choreographic protocols that worked with different sets of artists to create these protocols to have choreography performed in public places. So participation from the public and in public places. The first two protocols were created in 2019, and then they were able to develop the project further with other protocols being created once the Creative Europe funding was awarded. So I am just going to share my screen now and show you a little bit about the Vibes project. Share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. So that's the first slide that has the address on for Vibes in Paris. That's Orb's address. The Vibes experience is an open choreographic and music experience. So it's an audio and choreographic performance where participants wear headphones and listen to an audio guidance from a choreographer. And the goal is to create a connected dance within a public space. So these are the different protocols that's available at the moment through the Vibes project. So this protocol was the first, and it's a contact and meeting experience through dance, and that was created in Paris. Vibes 2 is an engagement of the body in a tribal dance. It's a fusion of crump and an arcade game, and that was created in Paris. Vibes 3 is a dialogue between bodies, architecture and urban vibrations, created in Italy. Vibes 4 is a choreographic and sonic game created in the Netherlands. And Vibes 5 was created in Coventry, and this is a somatic journey to reconnect with the world. And we now have Vibe 6 that was created in Paris also. So I will just stop sharing my screen for that. There is also a video on the Vibes website that will be hopefully shared in the chat. If that can be popped in there, that would be great. So for the creation team from Coventry, some of these protocols are more playful than others, and others are more thought-provoking, and we wanted people to have a different experience with the city and with each other. So a very kind of subtle, the technology would be subtly present within that experience. And we were interested in bringing awareness to our own bodies in a public space. And we've heard this from the other speakers as well as an awareness of the space, and to be able to bring a different perspective to maybe seeing the city differently, or seeing a public place like a park differently to what we might do if we just might normally walk through or experience it in whatever way we are used to. We were also interested in patterns and how we create patterns knowingly and unknowingly. So these are the kind of creative ideas that we worked with as a team to create our protocol. The Vibes project is now going to different festivals throughout Europe over this summer, and hopefully will continue. And Vibes 5 showed at the International Festival on Sunday just gone. So that's a little bit about the Vibes project, and that's me. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. That was great. So lovely to see so many different iterations within so many different spaces. And this idea that there are lots and lots of bodies doing the same thing at the same time. And you talk really beautifully about synchronizing the bodies, but in different spaces. Yeah, no, really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
so
Suna.
This is your chance, audiences, to put your questions in the chat, and for us to I'll try and pick up as many of them as possible and offer them to Anna, Karen and Charlotte. But I just thought if I could have Anna, Karen and Charlotte, I thought I'd start with the questions, if that's all right. So for all three of you, really, you all talk so wonderfully about a physical body experience in a space. But I'd be really interested to know how do you decide which space? How do you decide where you want these audiences to experience? And it would be just really lovely to hear about those, a little bit about the choice of public spaces and how that comes about, even before, or whether it comes about alongside your audiences and what you want them to experience. Charlotte, if you don't mind me coming to you first, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just thinking about how do I choose the spaces. I think with walking stories, obviously sometimes I'm commissioned to make works and I'm kind of given a site, and that's a very different sort of endeavour in a way. But the projects that I've spoken about today, I think with walking stories, I was really interested in something similar to what Karen was talking about. How can we sort of engage with or encounter a space that we might be very familiar with, but with sort of fresh eyes, or experience it in a new way? And so I was interested in this notion of going for a walk in the park, like to get a breath of fresh air, to change your, like I think many people do it just partly for exercise, but also just to get a change of scene on their day. And for me, I noticed that if I go for a walk, it's often when I have the clearest thoughts. There's something about the regular rhythm of walking, either with a friend or on my own, where sort of it might be literally if I'm with a friend and differently if I'm on my own, but like the sort of chatter at the beginning kind of after sort of 10 minutes or so kind of peters out, and then maybe there's a period of silence, and then a different kind of conversation is made possible through this sort of spaciousness. So I was interested in how can we create a choreographic work that invites you into that kind of a world, and this is why we put this time frame of it. It's 1 hour long, the sort of duration that you might go for a walk, but obviously with quite a different kind of premise and invitation. And I think I was really aware before I'd made that work of audio pieces that had been made before, but often with that they were something that you would just do on your own. You'd put on the headphones and you go off and explore a place or take a walk down a particular route on your own, a lone investigation. And this felt really important to me as a group experience. And I think that's also where my background in dancing and choreography kind of was part of it, that this is something that we do collectively and that we experience collectively. And a little bit similar to what Anna was saying, I was also interested in the relationship between the sort of intentional and the spontaneous audience, and how visible or not visible this work is. So when 20 people walk together with headphones on, other park users will notice that as being like an entity. We also worked quite a lot with geometry and pattern and our kind of feeling about pattern. There's something about 20 people walking together that also makes you think, I think makes you not feel exposed if you're within that 20, and maybe you would not be so confident to do some of the invitations if you were like just with 3 people. You might get more of a feeling of like, what are they doing? Whereas something 20 people say, oh, there's something going on that we don't understand, but this is kind of interesting. And also I think it's at other points in the work, people really separate and they go off on their own journey. And so in that sense, it becomes really invisible as a thing. People, it's not unusual for us to see people in a park with headphones on, sitting maybe on a bench and contemplating something. So some things are very, very minimal and you almost don't see it, it disappears. And other things give a presence of this work. And I think a park space kind of invites that. And then I think in quite contrast to it is this wasteland was, actually through the process of doing this cycling that I was talking about, this is where the beginnings of Is This a Wasteland came from, because we cycled from city centre out through kind of the edge lands of cities, through liminal spaces and into the next place. And if you're on a motorway or on a train, even if you see from the train those sorts of spaces, you don't ever stop there, you don't feel them with your kind of fleshiness. And so as we cycled these routes that were often these kind of unseen routes, I sort of started noticing these derelict left behind spaces and became super interested in them, in their kind of oddity and in the sort of scale of them, the architecture of them. And I got really fascinated about what would it be to gather there, to have a performance in that kind of space. And I mean, it became a whole other journey of, in terms of the producing, it was actually very, very difficult to get permission to be able to work on those spaces because they're not public, and people were very hesitant about letting us be in those spaces for lots of different, very political and often really mundanely boring reasons. But it was also part of the reason that the project took really so long to realise. And I think through that process, I became more and more determined and curious about what the politics of land is, who has a say in what happens in those spaces, at what point do they become valuable or not valuable. So often in the development of land, at a certain point, developers want to bring cultural activity to those spaces just before they develop them to make it like this new neighborhood that's going to be exciting, etc., etc. And I really was not interested to play into that. I was much more interested in seeing whether we could invite people who live really local to those spaces into these performances, for them to feel like this place that they maybe walk past every day on their way to the tube or to work or whatever, to the bus stop, that they can't access, that for that moment in time that they are welcome and that they can access it and they can see their local environment from a different place and feel a sort of temporary sense of ownership of that place. And it brought up, I guess, lots of new questions about liminal space, about authority, about how we respond to authority, how much we are or are not controlled in our environment. So I guess that's just 2 examples. I think you're muted, Suba.
Sorry, thanks, Charlotte. You missed all the thank yous. Thank you. Anna.
Yes, so I think some places themselves suggests here, wow, here would be, this gives an idea, that you can get an idea from a place. So sometimes it's that specific place that gives an idea for a topic to be researched, or a movement. Or it can be that we are thinking about certain questions, and then you come up on a place and, oh, this was really be interesting to explore this question here or this topic here. And sometimes it's the other way around, that you have some idea that you want to explore and you kind of look more purposely. Maybe you have an idea it should be urban, or it should be in some more nature setting, or so you're more actively looking for a suitable place. And of course, then first you go for what's either of those two ways has. Mostly you go for, like I did a performance last year at climbing down rocks down into the ocean, and then the performance continued in the ocean. And of course you first wanted to go to a very wild place, but then you have to think of audience accessibility. And so we had to sort of moderate where could we find the wildest place, but also made it possible for people to get there. It's kind of boring, but very practical and also important question to deal with. And sometimes, for instance, with commissions, I take time to research that place because it was suggested from somebody else. It takes a little bit more time maybe to see how can I connect to that place, what is some of my concerns or themes or things or something in that place that resonates in me that is interesting to start to develop from.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Anna. And Karen?
Yeah, I suppose that's different actually for the Vibes project, because we don't know what place it might be in, but we start from the premise of thinking that it will be in a city square or a city park, or so we're not so kind of site specific, but obviously we know that it's going to end up somewhere probably in the middle of a city or in those spaces. And inclusivity actually was really important to us in that, through the language that we used within the score, and also thinking about, well, where is it going to be, and how are people going to be able to access this experience. So that those were real drivers for us in thinking about the possible spaces that this could be in, but also really important in that creation process as well. And Charlotte was talking about the intentional and spontaneous audience, and I think that's really important as well, because when this work has taken place, so people, depending on where it's presented, people might, or have registered and come along and know the kind of experience that they're going to have. But actually, what it also creates is that spontaneous audience, that people stop and look and see what's happening and can join in if they want to, or come back and join in. So while we were creating that, we were thinking about those things of, what if somebody happens upon it, how will they join in, and what kind of space, and where are they going to come from, and what those were things that those were our considerations while we were creating.
Brilliant. Actually, just drawing from what all of you were saying, there's a question on the chat here from Dan from Artreach. His question is, what strategies can we use to break down barriers and encourage less engaged and confident audiences to take part in such highly participatory work? And I think all of you sort of touched upon that, but it'd be really interesting to hear your perspectives on what those strategies might be to engage those people who wouldn't normally. And I know you've talked about sort of spontaneous and sort of audiences who know it's happening, but it'd be really interesting to hear some of those strategies. If we maybe start with you, Anna?
I think you need to think about yourself as an audience member, and say, like Charlotte, you mentioned you maybe you wouldn't be a person who would maybe want to go into the performances you create, and sorry if I misunderstand you, but I'm thinking too, I mean, of course, it so comes down to what is the work about? What do you want to express? I think, and is it of a confrontational nature, or is it very inviting nature? And all this goes back to the artistic, what you want to express. So how you set up this open door or barrier, or the moment for entering the work, or the place of passing through this kind of line or barrier or front. I don't know really, sorry for my English, but most people understand, okay, it's some kind of performance going on. And maybe you're not in a theater where the line is very clearly drawn between the stage and the people sitting in the dark. So if you're in another place, you don't have that clear physical borderline perhaps, but most people feel, okay, it's a performance. So how can I cross that line? What is it for me that makes it possible to cross it? So maybe you have to make it very easy and like a gentle way to go into something, that you don't feel somebody's going to demand a lot from me, or I'm going to be very exposed, or so how can you set it up that I can participate maybe anonymously, or with not myself be put on stage if that's not what I want? And maybe another type of work, you really want the audience then, or participants, to become put on a certain stage, and that will attract a different person.
That's great, thank you. Karen?
Yeah, I think what Anna was saying really kind of chimes with the things that we were considering as well. That gentle way in and not feeling exposed is actually really, really key. And we, through the creation process, we worked with different groups of people. So we worked with a group of professional artists. We worked with other communities of people, and finding ways of how this could be accessed. And I think that, some people might not want to be singled out. So what is that gentle way in, and how do you make that comfortable for people? And that's what we wanted. We wanted people to interact as well as have their own individual experience. So how are you able to create that? But I think also knowing who can access the work and knowing who can't is also really key. And that helps through the marketing of the work as well. For the Vibes project, people put in earphones. There's a soundscape, and it was pointed out to us that might be overwhelming for people with sensory processing challenges. So being able to say that actually then helps people know whether they can access or not, and that might change on a daily basis also. And part of what we also say in the introduction is that people have the permission to sit down whenever they want to, or come out of the experience whenever they want to. So that would hopefully also help in any decisions about continuing or not.
No, that's really important, actually, is that feeling of that you don't have to do anything. And it's quite difficult sometimes, I suppose, to get that across when you're inviting people. No, thank you. And Charlotte?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two sets of considerations. One is about how you build trust once you've stepped across the line and say, yes, I want to participate in this, which, as both Karen and Anna have been talking about, is sort of how this was full of consideration for us with these works, that we the beginning of the work feels very possible, that you're literally just walking and listening and stopping. You're like, oh yes, I can do this, I'm not exposed, it's okay, I'm not going to be asked to like convene with a tree or something, I don't know, like things that people might be anxious about. We actually didn't use the word dance, I don't think, in any marketing material, so that there wasn't this feeling of like, oh, what am I going to be asked to do in a park or this place where other people might be watching. So I think there's something about how you sort of build an experience that means that once you're in it, you feel like you can keep being in it. And we found the headphones actually very useful for that. And feedback was really strong about this, in terms of like the headphones feel like they give you permission to do things that you might not otherwise feel like you had permission to do. It feels like quite a private space, but also a shared space. You don't have to talk to anybody else because you're in this sort of little bubble. And in terms of access, I think this is also really relevant, that I think we got better at it, but even people that were deaf and hard of hearing did engage with these works, and I found ways to manage that. And a lot of it would be about speaking with people before the experience began, so because actually there's lots to see as well as lots to hear, so there are ways of being with the work, if you know what's coming, that kind of can give space for that. But then there's this whole other sort of set of questions and strategy, which I think the questioner was asking about how you get people to step over the line in the first place. And with these works that I made, I think there is a big commitment. It's not something that where you can watch as a passers-by, but you won't have that much information. We're for the audience members who have a full experience, we're really inviting them to commit some of their time, to stay for the hour or for the hour and 20. Of course you can leave, but it's not something you can kind of dip in and out of partway through. It's something that you kind of arrange to come to and that you make that commitment to. And what we found was that word of mouth is probably the kind of strongest selling tool. Dance historically, in terms of in theatres and so on, is often kind of presented one night, like I say, the one night wonder, like that it's like you're in one night and then you move on and move on and move on. We don't have a tradition of long runs really, particularly within kind of experimental dance. And I really pushed for something different, particularly with Walking Stories, but actually with both shows, where we tried to get programming that was with Walking Stories several times in a day, maybe over several days if it was a festival context. And with Dance Umbrella, for example, which we presented Walking Stories in 2015, I had this ambition to be very present in the festival, across the festival. So I sort of approached Emma Gladstone, the then artistic director, about what would it be to like try and be present nearly every day of the festival. So actually we were in 4 different parks across London, in actually local neighbourhoods rather than in central London. So sort of one in each sort of corner of the city. And we were on every day of the festival, 15 days, 35 shows. And there was more a feeling of like, where is it on, not when is it on. And word of mouth definitely was something that we could see in terms of the audience numbers and the bookings. It kind of did this big arc through the course of the festival. And I think when you're doing something that is experiential and that you have the experience with your body, the people who have done it are the best sellers for you. They're like, oh, that was incredible, I feel totally different. Like, when's, like, can my friend come tomorrow? And that is exactly what happened. And with Is This a Wasteland, we kind of did it, I guess I sort of learned from that experience, and then I guess it was a bit of a different, it was slightly different in that it's not something that tours so much, but we are very present in each of the locations that we're working on for a sort of considerable period of time. When we were making the work, we were mostly in Corby, and Corby sort of historically has sort of low engagement in the arts, and people don't know so much about dance and tend that sort of audience numbers are lower. And we were there in the centre of their town, in this site that used to be technical college that had then been kind of knocked down and been left empty for many years. We were between the cinema and the job centre, in the centre of their town for like more than a month, 5 weeks, there every day. So people would just come past and ask us what we were doing. We became very familiar to their landscape. They all had their own history and stories in relation to that site that they cared about. And we were really worried about audience numbers, but they were fantastic there. And I think it's because people had seen us and spoken to us that we'd, you know, the teenagers that worked in the cinema came, the people from the job centre came, the people that worked in the office across the road came, and then they came back the next night with their friends and their family. So it was a kind of gradual building of a feeling of presence that built our audience.
Great, thank you. Actually, I know that both Karen and Charlotte have talked about this, but we've got a question from Maggie from Xtrax. She says it's really interesting to hear several audio headphone projects explained. Does this create a sense of detachment between audience members, do you think? And perhaps a barrier for the onlookers? So if you walk into a space and there are people with headphones on, they're in it. And if you're not in it, is that a barrier for engagement? Karen, maybe if we start with you.
I don't think it's a barrier. It's certainly not a barrier for the people taking part, because I think they know they're part of something anyway. So I don't think that it would be a barrier in that sense. I think when you're looking on, I'm thinking about just this Sunday actually in the middle of Birmingham, and seeing kind of a crowd of people that gathered, watching a group of people and not really knowing what they were doing, and the audience didn't know what they were doing. So there's something really beautiful in those moments, I think. So and I would like to think that it might encourage people to come back and to try it. So yeah, because there's a curiosity about, you know, what is it that they're hearing and what's making them move that way, maybe. But I don't necessarily think it would be a barrier for, certainly not for the people that want to participate anyway, because you start to notice that you're either doing the same as people or you're doing something different, and then there's moments where you're asked to connect with other people as well. So those connection moments are specifically created so that, you know, you're there as a collective.
And Anna, with any projects that you've been part of that has involved headphones?
No, but we solved it. We had, I did an interactive installation. So there was a big room, and when you moved in it, you activated certain sounds and music and lighting. But we used cameras, and we were not recording, so they were just movement detection. And then it was choreographed so that depending on how you moved yourself, and depending in what constellations you moved without others, you activated different sounds. So you activated a soundscape and a lighting scape. So the room changed as you moved slow, fast in certain places, in certain rhythms. And we did it like that because me not being very technical, but of course I work with technician in this project, and we worked with a composer and a lighting designer. But we wanted to get to that it should be sort of live, IRL, with the people in the room without some kind of apparatus on the body. So we wanted to have this, that you could also have the sensitivity and focus on other people's, with all, you know, eyes and ears and feeling the body around.
Thank you. And Charlotte?
I think one of the responses we've definitely had from audience members is that sometimes that they describe the experience of the headphones being something that both makes them feel connected to the group that they're with and also feel separate. So there's sort of this dual thing of feeling like, oh, we're with many others and we're on this thing together, but we're also like in our own little worlds. So there's sometimes feedback of feeling alone and feeling connected and shifting in those planes. And I think sometimes the sort of first like in both the works, people unless they've already experienced one of the other pieces before, they don't know at the outset that the instructions will deviate, that they're not hearing all the same thing, because they will start in the same place where the information at the beginning is the same, and then gradually the instructions start sort of deviating. And that moment is a bit like a kind of, if you're on the outside and you know what's going to happen, it's a bit like watching something tear a little bit as people start to realize, oh, maybe I'm hearing something else. And that moment can, I think, sometimes feel not alienating exactly, but confusing, because other people seem to be doing something different from what you're doing. And it takes a level of confidence to be like, no, I've been asked to stop. So I'm going to stop, even if somebody else is continuing to move. And that can be like a kind of place of tension to begin with. And sometimes it results in everybody carrying on moving, even if they've been asked to stop, or everybody's like, there's a sort of tentativeness sometimes that happens in a group. And then I think gradually a confidence builds of like, oh no, I can just, it's a sort of moment of liberation also of like, oh, actually I'm hearing something else and I can just be with that. I don't have to worry about anybody else. I can be with the thing that I'm doing. And also I think it also holds this potential of giving permission of like, do I want to do the thing that I've been asked to do or not? Because I do have some agency of choosing not to, of taking the headphones off. With Is This a Wasteland? That's wireless. We use sort of like it's actually kind of conference technology, a bit like silent disco. It took a long time actually to get the technology working right on the scale of the sites we were working on, and not interference and things. But sometimes people realize that they can actually switch which strand they're listening to, and so they'll flick around. So there's these other kind of layers that are possible. I think for the people, the onlookers maybe in the park who are not participating, as Anna said, I'm not sure if it's a barrier. I think it creates curiosity. Definitely you don't feel part of it because you don't know why these things are happening or these people are engaging in this act in the way that they are. And often it feels like with very sort of strong focus and attention, they are really inside the world that they're in, and you can't really fathom why if you're on the outside of it. So yes, there is a separation. I think there's a kind of distinct boundary, and occasionally people's headphones will go wrong or stop working, and then you feel definitely like you're out of it when you were in it before. So those things are really interesting for me, I think. And my decision to work with headphones was less about me being really into headphones, but more about that they weren't created the possibility for creating the kind of encounter that I was interested in outdoor spaces, without me like with a megaphone shouting at people. So it's really interesting to hear you, Anna, talking about a different way of inviting people into a physical experience, participatory experience that's not with that. Because it wasn't that I was just interested in working with headphones. It was more like they were a means for me to be able to realize the artistic desires that I had.
Great, thank you. There's a question here, and the question says they'd be really interested to hear what we think or we see as developments and trends in outdoor dance at the moment. Has the pandemic affected our desire to be together in public spaces? So I remember having this conversation with someone the other day, and someone just said, no, people want to be outdoors, people want to be together, we're desperate to be together. We want reasons to go out there, we want reasons to see art, we want reasons to experience things in a collective, a collaborative way. And that's the sense that I know I'm getting. And I was part of a project just last week where there were 600 people who volunteered to turn up to an outdoor space to be part of something collective. And this notion of being together and being collective, I know it was large numbers, but for me there was a real joyous celebration of that at the end of the whole process of being together and watching and being part of something, and it was participatory. So I suppose from me, in my perspective, it's the joy of it, and the lack of that being together and sharing an experience, especially in a public space that is outdoors, that is not in a conventional theatre, feels really immediate, necessary, and that's been my experience. But it'd be lovely to hear from all of you how that is in terms of the work you make, and for you as artists, and the kind of shifts and patterns and trends that you think have developed over the last sort of few years. Should we start with you, Karen?
Yeah, I think there's definitely that the shift to creating or having work that is presentable outdoors, because people are certainly more comfortable coming to things outdoors, I think. And I think that it just feels like that's going to continue for a while, because there's still, the underlying concerns with, particularly with different kind of groups of people, that I think, that just feels more comfortable and less risky in being able to come and see things outdoors. So, and the more that is presented outdoors, I think that it is encouraging people to come out to see more as well. I was just going to mention about the Vibes project here, because this was, we found out, so the funding was applied for in 2019, and we found out in 2020 it was awarded while we were in the first phase of the pandemic. So then we were like, well, how do we make something then now where we can't touch each other? Because of course that at that time, that was what was really prevalent in what we were doing. And also we had our composer who it was in Vancouver, so we had to create online together over what should have been, creation periods where we spent weeks together. It ended up being this very disjointed creation, but we got there eventually. But there was that other kind of consideration in that, well, do we encourage people to touch each other? How close do we want people to go? How far should we go? I mean, one of the plus points was we were creating something that was outdoors. Maybe that will be okay, but we didn't know where that was going at that point. So I just think now where we're at, while we're hopefully coming through the other end, there seems to be this comfortability with being outdoors, and that seems to be a kind of trend that's happening at the moment, is that people are presenting more and more and making work for the outdoor spaces.
Brilliant. Thanks, Karen. And Charlotte?
Yeah, so I think we realised that both Walking Stories and Is This a Wasteland were kind of naturally quite socially distanced and COVID safe works without us having to do much to change them. There was lots of questions that we had with Is This a Wasteland, where lots of materials are being handled, about whether that was a potential risk or not. And actually the audience members and the performers all wear gloves anyways, because some of the objects are quite rough. And so we just bought another whole set, like another 100 pairs of gloves, so we could have one set that were being used one night and then another set that were, so that this on the second night that we could alternate them, basically, so that we just did things like that. But we realized how much these two shows were already kind of suitable and set up for following the pandemic. Is This a Wasteland was meant to be restaged in 2020. Obviously that didn't happen. And when we came to restaging the work eventually in September 2021, it was a very profound and powerful moment for lots of the audience members and also the collaborative team, because it was for many people the first thing that they'd come to. And the experience of I mean, in terms of audience numbers, this work is for up to 100 audience. So in a theatre, 100 is not a lot, but in terms of like a live interactive experience, participatory work with 100 people, it feels like a lot. It feels like a big kind of epic scale of gathering, because it's a bit like having 100 performers on a site at any one time. And lots of people spoke to us afterwards about how moving that was. And I actually I've brought a couple of comments cards people filled in after the shows in London, and I might just read a couple of them because I think they just speak the things that we were already feeling. This one says, an achingly, overwhelmingly beautiful experience to be doing something together after such a long time of apartness, and to feel my individual part within that wider endeavour was powerful. I'm leaving shifted a little bit more part of the whole. And another one, so needed after 18 months of being locked away, separated, scared. And for us in London to enjoy each other, our differences, our off-grid spaces, our community, and making choices together. And then to sit around the fire drinking hot chocolate as the sun set. It doesn't get much better than this. Tonight has been definitely the highlight of my summer. And a final one, I came here full of reservations and I'm leaving so pleasantly surprised. I've been suffering from anxiety all week and this show has been a wonderful tonic, a breath of fresh air. So I think there was lots of people who were quite anxious, the team included, were really quite anxious about how we deliver this work safely, how we deliver the work safely for each other as well. There was a lot of kind of tentativeness and a lot of figuring out of how do we be together again after not being together and not having to work together in this way. And it was a beautiful experience with audiences, I must say.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte. It's really lovely comments. In fact, I was going to ask people to sort of finish with any audience reactions or comments. And I don't know, Anna, if you want to finish with an audience reaction or a comment that you've experienced. We've got 5 minutes left and I just want to give a couple of minutes to Xtrax to wrap up. But yeah, it'd be lovely to hear from you as well, Anna.
No, but I recognize some things that Charlotte and Karen spoke about, and something that I came to think of also, if you think historically about outdoor performances, of course, there is something that's been going on, much longer than in theaters, and maybe also can be interesting in terms of accessibility and who is the audience there. If you think about traditionally who performed in the streets and who had access to that, and what kind of status did that have, and now there's more possibilities and funders are getting onto it, and theaters and festivals. I mean, before it was much harder to come to a theater and say, hey, we want to do it outdoors, because of course they have to sell tickets and this is a problem. How do we sell ticket maybe in an outdoor performance? And so there are all these kinds of other things that come into play. But yeah, so also makes me think of also the reason why you want to be outdoors or why you want to be there, besides that it's you need it because it's a pandemic, or we have refound this joyful way of meeting, but is there how it connects to your artistic, what you want to explore. I think that is really a source and a foundation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I just want to say a huge thank you, Karen, Charlotte and Anna, for just sharing so much with us and being so thoughtful and generous with what you were sharing, what you've shared with us. And it just made me want to run out and see everything that you three have just spoken about. You've just described it so vividly and so beautifully. So thank you so much. It's been really wonderfully joyous to listen to you, all three of you. So yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you and pass you over to George, who's going to sum up and say goodbye from Xtrax. Thank you.
Thank you, Suba, and thank you everyone for attending this session, and to all of our panelists and our brilliant chair for hosting. So the online programme for the Outdoor Dance Showcase 2022 continues on Swapcard until later today. You now have some free time for networking before the next session, which kicks off at 2 p.m. UK time. So as a reminder, here's some useful information for using SwapCard during this interim section. So remember that you can access SwapCard on your browser, and I'd also recommend that you download the app, especially for those of you who will be attending the in-person program on Friday. Now's the time to use the app to browse through the platform, looking at attendees' profiles as well as company profiles in the exhibitor hall. So as we said earlier, think of this as a virtual version of a conference where everyone sets up their own tables. Just this time, all of the information is there at the click of a button. On these profile pages, you can reach out directly to the companies or the individuals and start a conversation directly with them, which we would absolutely encourage you to do. The details of the program, the full program for today, can be found right here on SwapCard under the Programs tab in the main menu. And if you need any support navigating the platform, please use the contact the app support team by clicking on your profile picture in the top right corner of your SwapCard webpage. And as I said earlier, the next event will be happening at 2 p.m. UK time right here on SwapCard, and this is the artist pitching session. So we're going to see a selection of 9 artists presenting new projects which are available for touring. The session will start hopefully bang on 2 p.m. this time. Apologies for that delay at the beginning of this session. And it will start with a video that's been pre-made, which will be introduced as part of the video. We'll then go into all of the 9 pitching artists with a short closing section live streamed at the end. And for those traveling to the in-person session this afternoon or tomorrow, we'll see you at 6 p.m. tomorrow in the Rep in Birmingham for some drinks. So once again, thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in and for our wonderful speakers and panelists, and we hope to see you all shortly for the next sessions this afternoon. Thank you very much.